The wind cut across the prairie with a bitter insistence, flinging snowflakes like shards of glass against the barren landscape. Ayanna Redfeather pressed her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the coarse wool biting into her skin, yet it offered little warmth. Her boots crunched through the drifts, each step stirring a tiny cloud of white into the frigid air, and she felt the heaviness of eyes she imagined on her back, the whispers of a town that had long ago turned its judgmental gaze upon her. "May I sleep in your cabin, sir? It's freezing outside," she called, voice trembling not from the cold alone but from the shame that had lodged in her throat like a stone. Snow whipped at her hair and she stumbled forward, spotting the glow of a lantern swinging gently in the dark. Jeremiah Callahan stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, his coat dusted with snow, his sharp gaze studying her as if he could read the story etched into every line of her face. He was a man whose presence drew respect and a touch of fear in equal measure, wealthy beyond measure and yet measured in kindness. "You'll catch your death out here," he said quietly, voice roughened by years of commanding ranch hands, yet threaded with a gentleness she could not place. His eyes lingered on her, not with judgment, but with a curiosity that made her heart twist with unfamiliar hope. "Come inside," he added, stepping aside, the warm glow of the cabin spilling over her like a promise. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine smoke and leather, the fire snapping and crackling in the hearth. Ayanna's hands shook as she brushed the snow from her shawl, and Ja offered her a seat near the warmth. She hesitated, aware of the town's whispers and her uncle's venomous lies, that she had disgraced herself, that her bloodline was stained. Her chest tightened at the memory of being cast out, of the empty stares of neighbors and cousins alike, and the cruel laughter that followed her steps as she walked past the frozen windows of her family home. She wondered if anyone would ever see the truth. Ja watched her quietly, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands twisted together as if they were both a shield and a plea. "I've heard stories," he said softly, "but I don't believe them." His words were measured, deliberate, each one a small act of rebellion against the town's cruelty. Ayanna's eyes flickered to his, searching for insincerity but finding none. She felt something unfamiliar stir, a fragile ember of trust. Yet still the weight of shame clung to her like frost. Hours passed in the quiet, broken only by the occasional crack of the fire or the wind outside. Ja offered her food, a simple stew, bread warmed by the flames, and she ate slowly, savoring both the nourishment and the sense of safety. Each bite seemed to thaw a part of the fear that had frozen her heart. He did not ask for her story, but she told it anyway, words spilling in hushed tones as though speaking too loudly might shatter her. Her uncle, Thaddeus, had claimed her inheritance, spread lies about her virtue, and forced her from the home she had grown up in. The town had laughed and she had walked away, believing that she was unworthy of dignity or love. Ja listened, and for every detail she revealed, he offered a quiet reassurance. A nod, a glance, the subtle touch of a hand resting briefly near hers on the table. He did not pity her. He regarded her with a respect that was rarer than gold in these parts. The firelight played across his strong features, and in that moment, Ayanna saw a man who was both formidable and fair, a man whose strength was not in cruelty but in justice. A flicker of curiosity danced in her mind. Could someone like him see the truth in her, even when the world refused to? Days passed, and the storm outside raged as fiercely as the unspoken feelings that began to weave between them. Joe would ride out to check his horses, returning with tales of snowdrifts and distant herds, each story punctuated by the warmth of shared silence. Ayanna found herself lingering by the hearth, watching the way he moved with a quiet authority, the way his hands, calloused and strong, could coax life from stubborn soil and stubborn horses alike. Small gestures, a hand extended to steady her, a cloak draped over her shoulders, a loaf of bread pressed into her palm, spoke louder than declarations ever could. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, her heart began to trust again, to hope. Yet shadows loomed over this fragile peace. Thaddeus had not forgotten his schemes. Word reached them that he pressed his claims aggressively, his lies sharper than ever. The town buzzed with the old, cruel stories, whispering, "She's the girl who," and Ayanna felt the old sting of shame. She wondered if Joe would stand with her, or if the weight of his reputation would compel him to turn away. He did not. Instead, he confronted the gossip with calm authority, his presence alone enough to quiet those who would seek to harm her. His belief in her stirred something fierce within Ayanna, a courage she had not felt since the day she was cast from her family home. One evening, as the snow thickened and the wind carved patterns against the windows, Thaddeus arrived at the cabin. His eyes gleamed with greed, and he spoke of property, inheritance, and dishonor. Ja met him at the threshold, the firelight casting long shadows across his face. "She is who she says she is," Ja declared, his voice steady and resolute. "She is innocent and her inheritance will remain hers." The confrontation was quiet yet electric, the kind of tension that makes the air itself seem to hold its breath. Thaddeus faltered under Ja's unwavering gaze, the townsfolk witnessing a dignity that was unassailable. Ayanna watched, tears pricking her eyes, as the man who had once seemed so distant and inscrutable became her protector, her ally, her partner in a world that had so long sought to diminish her. The vindication did not come with fanfare, it was subtle, a reclaiming of space, a righting of wrongs. Ayanna's family estate was restored, and the town slowly recognized the truth of her character. In the quiet aftermath she allowed herself to be seen fully, without shame, without fear. And in the glow of the hearth, she looked at Ja, understanding finally that the ember she had felt flicker in his presence had grown into a steady flame. Their hands met over the warmth of the table, fingers intertwining, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed through shared struggle, quiet courage, and the slow unfolding of trust. Snow continued to fall, each flake catching the firelight as if the world itself celebrated their small victory. Ja and Ayanna stood together at the cabin door, looking out over the prairie, the horizon painted in soft hues of dawn. Words were unnecessary, the silence carried the weight of everything they had endured and everything they now shared. The wind still whispered across the plains, but it no longer carried the sting of judgment, only the promise of what was yet to come. Ayanna drew a deep breath, the crisp air filling her lungs with a sense of renewal. The past remained, yes, but it no longer defined her. She had endured shame, injustice and exile, and yet she stood tall, her dignity intact. Beside her, Ja's hand rested lightly on her back, a silent vow of steadfastness, and she felt the stirrings of something deeper than gratitude, something tender, fierce and enduring. Together they would face the world, a partnership forged in trust and tempered by hardship. As the first rays of sunlight kissed the snow-covered prairie, Ayanna turned to the horizon, feeling the warmth of the fire still lingering in her bones. She understood now that life's cruelest trials often illuminate the strongest truths. She had been tested, and she had emerged not only intact but radiant, her heart open to love, her spirit unbroken. And as Ja led her back inside, the door closing against the wind, she whispered softly to herself, a lesson for any who might listen, that courage and kindness, when held steadfast, can overcome even the deepest shadows, and that the heart, when nurtured patiently, finds its home in unexpected, wondrous ways. The cabin door clicked shut, and the snow continued to fall, each flake a quiet promise of tomorrow, of hope, and of the enduring beauty of lives rebuilt with patience, grace and love.